Go ahead and call the meeting to order. I don't see any public on here. Obviously there's no public there, so no public comments. And on to new business. I'm assuming we already did the landscaping update.
Tom, you want to cycle back to approval of the minutes?
Sure.
It's the one you gloss over every time, man.
I know. Well, actually, it wasn't on this agenda. I need to approve the minutes from last meeting, which was
August.
Motion to approve.
Second.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Yay.
Aye.
All right. Now we're moving on to new business since I'm glossing over stuff. Landscape update. I guess we already have that.
Yeah, Tom, I'll kick that off. I think there's going to be more to the subject. I'll kind of cue it up and then hand it off to our Park and Recs division. Looks like there's a few faces on here. We have Amy Beatty, who is the director of the Park and Recs division. We have
Department.
What was that?
Department.
Sorry. I feel like I use those interchangeably. Sorry. Park and Recreations Department. We have Sally Thigpen, Assistant Director for the Park and Recreations Department. And we also have Ron McMillan. And Ron, you got to remind me of your title because I feel like it's ever changing and I'm not sure what that title is. So I apologize.
My title is Superintendent of Parks, Landscape, and Forestry. So anything with grounds and parks and trees related is in my work group.
Gotcha. Thank you, sir. Brought on the team here today just to cover a few things. Number one, to give a general landscaping update of some of their efforts over the last few weeks, if not months. I think through the years since I've been here, as well as predating me, there's been a lot of questions, concerns, positive comments, and a lot of just initiatives in general that have kind of filtered from the MSD out to their department and individuals in the department as well. Just a kind of an update on where we are and some internal staffing recommendations on where we want to take the landscaping barrier fence initiatives that the committee voted on to fund this fiscal year for the 4+ blocks on North 4th or North Front Street. So with that, I'll hand it over. I'm not sure who wants to kind of kick it off on your side, if it's Amy or Sally or Ron. So I'll let you guys take it from here.
Thank you, Chance. I'll take that. I appreciate the introduction, and I swear I didn't plant all of those Parks and Recreation questions that happened at the beginning of this meeting, but it was apropos because, you know, in addition to focusing on this downtown landscape bed discussion, I just wanted to generally comment that myself and my team are trying to look for ways that we can be more present to you and more coordinated and in collaboration with WDI and MSD efforts. So to that end, we hope to attend these meetings more frequently, and it looks like we've already got the next agenda item covered. And then I also plan to attend the WDI Development Committee meeting on October 30th. So just a more regular presence at some of your meetings so that you can get to know us and we can be more aware of our individual projects and how those can be, I guess, implemented more efficiently since there is so much overlap. And then one more thing before I get into this project is we deeply appreciate MSD, especially the MSD ambassadors. I provided City Council with an update on our Riverwalk maintenance and inspection program at their council agenda briefing on Monday morning and mentioned to them what an important component the ambassadors' presence on the Riverwalk is. And Chance, maybe that's another thing we can come back and do too, is overview, because there's probably a lot of questions among this group of what our maintenance program looks like, how often we're out on the Riverwalk, and how we identify repairs, replacements, and how we schedule those. So happy to come back and do that if that's of interest to the group. But today we're here to talk about downtown streetscape, and this really arose from comments and observations by some city council members upon completion of the latest Front Street streetscape project. As the contractor was installing new plant beds, our engineering folks had some, admittedly, I think everyone thought pretty tacky looking posts and string there to help prevent people from walking through those areas as they were concluding construction. That was always meant to be a temporary condition, but it brought to bear observations from some council members of, can we have permanent landscape barriers around these plant beds? And I am about as old as a dinosaur and have spent much of my working adult life at the city. So I remember when we did at one time have attractive landscape fencing surrounding these beds, and it didn't work out as well as we'd hoped. And for a variety of reasons, we ended up removing those. The beds were in a bit of a different location back then. And so one of the unintended consequences we had was when people were parallel parking, they were opening their doors into the fencing. So that was obviously something that we needed to mitigate. That would no longer be an issue now where the beds are located on the corners and not in the mid block. But the other thing is just eyes wide open as we embark on this again, is we just frankly just saw a lot of vandalism and people just intentionally trying to mess with the fencing, which is pretty expensive. It's got to be custom made because these landscape beds are of various sizes. And then just because of the risk of vandalism, this isn't a product that we would just go to Home Depot or Lowe's to buy. It needs to be commercially made and heavy enough to limit the amount of just beyond vandalism, also just wear and tear that it would take. So with that, we think we've come up collectively with my staff and Chance a good idea to utilize the funding that was allocated to the MSD for this project initially, and that would be to have a pilot test site for the plant beds on the 200 and 300 block of North Front Street for these fences. And, you know, hopefully it would be a successful installation and beyond. And if it is, we would monitor that, evaluate it, and if all is going well, recommend to City Council ongoing funding in future years to expand the fencing along additional blocks of North Front Street. So that's the main project, but we also wanted to give the MSD an update on what our crews do to maintain those plant beds downtown. So across the city, we have most of our landscape maintenance on a 2-week rotation. There are some sites, we have, I believe, 12 of them in all that we actually contract out maintenance for. Those include some of our fire stations. They also include some of our gateway areas and some of our downtown parks that are sort of clustered together. So we hire a landscape contractor to go out there and do the mowing, the weeding, the trimming, the litter pickup for us. And that allows us to be more efficient as the city acquires more and more acreage each year. We have the same amount of staff that is tasked with doing all that mowing, litter control, blowing, weeding, trimming, etc. We've actually acquired 16 new acres to maintain over the last 5 years and about double that over the last 10 years. And at the same time, we have unfortunately encountered a pretty consistently high vacancy rate that really started to be more acutely felt after the pandemic. For 2 to 3 years, we were hovering at a 25% vacancy rate for our grounds techs, which meant that we weren't reaching that 2-week rotation level all the time. And that included on Front Street. We are currently down to a 10% vacancy rate. That still sounds high, but for us, we're like, woohoo, we're down to 10%. That being said, you know, just with the attention on downtown and the emphasis on downtown, I tasked Ron and Sally with looking at a different way to do business that would enhance maintenance downtown. And so what we developed a couple of months ago was to dedicate a crew to perform maintenance downtown 3 to 5 days a week in lieu of keeping downtown on that same citywide rotation. Again, which is 2, sometimes 3 weeks. And so I'll allow Ron and Sally to comment on that further if you want more details. And certainly when I'm through speaking, I'd like to hear all your questions, but did just want to point out that we didn't get additional staff in order to do this. So, you know, somebody mentioned Halliburton Park early on. That park is important to a lot of people too. As we shift these resources downtown, then we're likely to feel negative effects of landscape maintenance rotations at other locations across the city. We have made city management and city council aware of our need to increase our landscape contract so that we can get caught up and get these rotation rates down citywide. Another unusual difficulty that we had this past summer, we usually, when peak maintenance season hits, we put a surge of workers out there to help us maintain our areas through the hiring of workers from contracted temporary agencies. And this year, those workers just weren't there either. So we're looking at taking the money that's funded for that effort and seeing about increasing our landscape contracts. So I say all that to say that we want our city to look beautiful. I know you want our city to look beautiful. When you see things that may look like they're neglected, please rest assured that we know that they may appear that way, but we're always trying to reassess and reallocate. I can tell you that the guys and girls who are on our maintenance staff are so proud of our city, and they want to make things look as best as they can as well, and are doing the most with the resources that they have allocated. But I will stop there because I've done a lot of talking, and turn it over for questions. And again, I'll allow Sally and Ron to go into any details that you'd like. And if you want to first just start with the pilot project with the fencing, I mean, that money's been allocated. We're anxious to see that going. So whatever you need from Parks and Recreation to facilitate selecting that fencing and that vendor and getting that under contract, you know, we want to see that happen as soon as possible.
Chance, kind of where are we in that process right now
We wanted
from
to
our side?
We just wanted to bring a quick update, which Amy brought on kind of the
Gotcha.
city's and city staffing recommendation to kind of cut the project in half and pilot it and make sure it works first. I think our next step is collectively on the city side to create an RFP, potentially create an RFP. I think if we keep it under a $90,000 threshold by cutting it into half, we can move a little quicker, but we just got to scope it, procure it, and then get it installed. And I'm foreseeing a question on the funding piece of that. if we do not utilize all that 150,000 this year and we do cut the project in half, that money will roll back into the MSD fund balance like it always does. And we can recommend that back to council and the city manager to utilize next year or carry over into next year to complete that second portion if the pilot does go well. So that money's not a use it or lose it. It's going to remain in the MSD's fund balance to continue and expand the program, kind of like Amy had mentioned.
Gotcha.
So Chance, technical question. I think if I heard you correctly, you're anticipating that the city will issue the RFP and award the contract. I guess I had that backwards. I was under the assumption if the money had been appropriated to the MSD, that the MSD would be able to get the contract, and so we could do it more quickly that way.
No,
Actually, that's what I thought that as well, but it was going to be handled by WDI, but so again, same thing, get it done quicker.
yeah, maybe there was a mix up there. Budget has been appropriated 150,000 use of MSD funds. Amy, I thought when we had met internally, me, you, Tom, Chad, Sally, maybe others, that we had determined that the city was going to take lead. Similarly to how we did the tree wells a few years back, where city took lead, they procured it, city's contractor, it was just a use of MSD funds. For the MSD to procure this, we would have to make an amendment to WDI's contract to go down that route.
Okay, that does sound familiar now, Chance.
Okay.
I think we asked ourselves that same question a few months back, Amy. We just haven't talked about it. So I think maybe between you, me, and Sally, we can put our collective heads together and probably scope an RFP for proposals and probably get that out pretty quick.
You know, guys, one thing I've noticed over the years, you get to Denver, DC, some of the major cities, the adjoining landowners, property owners are responsible for the maintenance. I mean, if you go into DC now, the only problem with that is they're all a little unique. Even New York City is the adjoining property. Denver, the easement on the other side of a sidewalk, the property owner's responsible for maintaining that and can be fined, but it's hard to implement after the fact. But I feel like the downtown business owners want to see the enhancements. They want to see the beautification, and there's a good likelihood we could encourage them to participate in the maintenance. I mean, it's not like we're having to do a full park. It's maybe get out and water the plants, or, you know, just if somebody's kicked the vents or whatever, or damaged some of the shrubs, instead of waiting a week or two, let's put it on the downtown business owners as well.
Agreed.
I mean, I do know on Castle Street, I guess we've been involved with the firehouse 10 years. I've never seen anybody doing anything on the street. And what's happened right there, Castle Street Collective has taken the time and put money together, and they're doing all of the enhancements up and down the street.
Gotcha.
Hey, I've got some questions. I'd like to introduce myself really quickly because this is the first meeting that I've been a part of. My name is Nicholas Newell. I'm a business owner with a office on Front Street, also in a condo downtown on Gray Street and Water. Thank you guys for having me here, and I want to thank the Parks and Rec Department for taking time out of their day to be with us, because I have a lot of questions in and around that, and it's very helpful having you guys here. Apologize for the ignorance, not being a part of your previous meetings, but I do have a question regarding the fencing. As somebody who's downtown, living, working, sleeping every single day, the fencing, what is the goal of having the fencing installed?
I'm not sure who that's being directed to, but I'll take a stab at it. When the last portion of the Front Street streetscape was completed, probably around this time last
Right.
year, an observation was made by Councilmember Luke Waddell, as well as I believe maybe a couple other council members, that they wanted to see if both from a beautification effort and from a landscape protection effort, if permanent barriers could be installed surrounding the plant beds. And that led to the discussion with MSD and the suggestion of the iron fencing serving that purpose.
So my thoughts on the matter, for whatever they are worth, is that it sounds like this is, in terms of protecting the landscape, it sounds like we're going to spend more money on fencing than we would spend in replacing the landscape that could potentially be damaged. I am familiar with the temporary ropes that were there, and I'm also familiar with the current condition of the beds. I'm not really seeing the cost return on fencing being installed. I think your comments were particularly helpful in that you have been there long enough to see that this was something we did before and it didn't work. But it seems to be like there's a lot of eagerness to do it again, and particularly with iron fencing, living in a environment that we live in. You got to think that for everything we do, there could be additional problems down the road. So beyond the vandalism that you mentioned, iron is going to have a high maintenance upkeep living in a saltwater area. And then I also have concerns about putting fencing around, like you mentioned, the 200 block being a pilot program. Well, those landscaping beds are by crosswalks, particularly the mid block crosswalk in front of 226 North Front. And putting in fencing could start obscuring, kids or pets or, people entering into that crosswalk or roadway. So I'm just wondering if we've taken all of that into consideration.
Christina, do you still have some of the examples we had first looked at?
Some of
who
the
presented it?
examples on,
The fencing, when what we're talking about doing, just so we can pass it back out to the group again. So
WDI did not provide any insight on the fencing. We've
Okay.
just we've been looking through the planting beds and sending out maintenance requests. And also, we did a full detailed landscaping maintenance request list that involved all 3rd Street and Front Street for the improvements that needed to be made. We also replaced 6 bushes this year.
Hey, can you guys see my screen?
that's it. That's what I'm looking
So
for.
I think I had presented some different
Okay.
examples, but this was from an internal document, I think, that
Yeah.
Amy and team had put together for council, kind of what we were working with a year plus ago. And I think both of these others are examples out of Winston-Salem that I believe Councilman Waddell had brought to the
Mhm.
table. And I think at a previous MSD meeting leading into the committee taking a pretty strong unanimous vote on supporting the funding and install for this, I think I'd shown a few other examples. But I think there's a few positives here. And Nick, I think I agree with you to a certain degree, and something internally we kind of wrestled with for a bit. Yes, replacing some of this plant material that gets stepped on, animals on, died, whatever. Yes, one-time replacement due to the vandalism is cheaper. Over and over and over replacement due to vandalism eventually adds up. So I think this is a protection piece, as Amy mentioned, but also I think it's an aesthetic advantage and positive as well. And I get the concerns that you mentioned, most of them very, very valid.
So seeing your pictures, I don't have any concerns with regard to pedestrian safety any longer. And I do agree. It is, I think, from an aesthetic, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
It sounds like this, it sounds like this would cost $45,000 per block. Is that accurate, or am I misunderstanding the information?
I think all in for the initial funding request and approximation, was about $135,000, and that would cover. The initial plan was to do 4+ blocks, basically from the 0 block from Market heading north to just past Walnut. There's a portion that extends into kind of near CFCC there, just north of Walnut. So the initial plan, 4.5 blocks, 4+ blocks, 130,000. We budgeted an extra 15 contingency there just in case. So if we pilot it with 2+ blocks, the 200, 300 block, as Amy had mentioned, I'd say roughly right now, budgetary somewhere between the $65,000 to $75,000 mark for the fencing on the 2+ blocks. And that was for the heavier duty. That was a quote. Amy, correct me if I'm wrong. That was a figure derived from the vendor that put these put the cast iron or heavier duty, classic material in Winston-Salem. And they are custom made. Obviously, we could do this a lot cheaper, but the cheaper you do it, the easier it is and more prone to vandalism and breaking. It will take. So, I mean, you could put a cheaper fencing in there, an aluminum, hollow iron, a hollow aluminum type fencing material around there for quite a few percentage points less than what we had budgeted. But I think the aesthetics are lacking, and also the longevity of this potentially too. So
I just have one last question about this and then I'll shut up. Do we, in doing this, the only last concern I have is the maintenance and upkeep of it. So are we going to, that's about $35,000 a block, which all said and done is really not terrible. But it's iron and it's going to need to be maintained. So are we going to set aside a reserve account, or do we have enough money in our budget that we feel confident every few years we can address corrosion concerns and things of that nature?
Yeah, Nick, I think that's something we're going to have to work through on the committee side in terms of how the MSD funds the long-term maintenance. That also plays into us wanting to just initially do 2.5 blocks versus 4.5 blocks. Not necessarily looking at the long-term maintenance of that, but the short-term maintenance. What is the damage or potential vandalism or cars wrecking into it? What does that look like on 2.5 blocks for a period of 12 months versus 4.5 blocks? So I think that the idea on cutting this thing in half was to get our feet wet, make sure this is going to work as we potentially expand it.
So I want to chime in just for a second, since I'm kind of a fossil here myself. I actually was involved with the removal of the material that was put there before. My first thought was, why are we doing something that we had done before and pulled it out? Because it was a bad idea. After looking at this material, though, this is higher up. What we had there before was lower, so it was a big tripping hazard for people. We had a lot of people fall in, like, at night. They didn't see it because it was, it wasn't very hot, very tall like this is. The other problem was they were garbage collection devices. So when stuff blew around downtown, they just basically got filled up with garbage and didn't really get cleaned out. Now, with this being a little bit higher, that might also mitigate that as well. As far as the maintenance on these things, I think that there's going to be very little maintenance on them because they're raw iron. It looks as if that these were painted. The ones that we had before were not, and they kind of rusted and kind of almost fed in with the downtown. So like the aesthetics part, as far as the maintenance goes, I don't think will be too much of an issue. I do like that this is going to be higher up so that it's less of a tripping hazard and less of a garbage collection device. So
Ray, if I'm remembering correctly, and Ron, you might be able to correct me if I'm wrong, I think we had originally quoted from the Winston-Salem vendor 24 inches in height, if I'm not wrong. So we were putting some height to this.
Yeah, and I think what we had before was no more than a foot tall. It was,
Yeah.
what it did was, there was like, metal, and then they had the loops. They just had small like loops that went.
Mhm.
And I think when we did I might stand corrected, but I remember when we did the first phase of the Front Street project, after that was when we decided to have them removed. So that's just, little history lesson.
Mhm.
Right, we can make sure the ambassadors team are actively looking within the beds to remove any trash and debris.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Many moons ago, the MSD program wasn't here, so you're gonna have that extra service with the ambassadors. Excellent point, Christina, to handle that.
And I think there'll be less trash with the height as well.
Mhm. Yep.
So Chance, if there's no other questions of us, we'll get with you and we'll get rolling on that RFP.
Yeah, and we'll keep the committee updated as we progress with scoping, ultimately putting this thing out to bid, make a decision, and I think we've got a very expedited goal of getting these things hopefully installed prior to Azalea Fest next spring. So if the stars align, we'll have some new shiny iron fencing come April.
Nice.
Chance, I have a question. If you don't mind, I just wanted to get some feedback from the group here. So when I spoke with the representatives from Winston-Salem about their experience with this fencing, they started with 4 sides and incrementally started removing the one side on the street. And I was just curious if this body had an opinion on 3 or 4 sides.
I think if it's not in the traffic where it's gonna get dinging cars and stuff, it should be 4. If it looks like they're gonna go someplace that it might, I see that as a valid point.
I would
So-
presume that was a mid-block issue that they had in Winston-Salem. Like, I'm looking at these pictures that he has on the screen, and it looks like maybe some of those beds, well, might have bordered areas where you could parallel park, but that looks just like it's a lane.
Mhm.
Yeah, Sally, correct me if I'm wrong. I think most of our landscaping beds we're looking to do this on are either mid-block at crosswalks without parallel parking or end of blocks without parallel parking, minus the back end of a car area. So I think I might be wrong about some of those though.
Yes, that's fine. I appreciate that feedback. And I just want to reiterate to the group that they're not all this nice rectangle. So the bed on the left, image 1, is a good example of sort of this odd shape here. And then if you kind of look at street view, I'd be happy to share my screen if that's helpful. But there are straight on 2 sides with a curve, and there's some that have like a bulge and then a long piece to it. So just keep that in mind from an aesthetic perspective, what it's actually going to look like on the ground. And then I also wanted to let you know that what we looked at from Swaim Ornamental Ironworks, this is what they have in Winston-Salem. It is powder coated black steel. So that's all I have to share. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Alex.
Thank you, Sally.
Yeah.
Thank you for having us.
Sure.
Thanks,
Thanks
Amy.
for making my job a little easier today. So
We look forward to coming back.
All right, great. Thanks, Amy. See you and your team.
thank you.
All right. Nothing else. We're moving on. Public safety grant. That means Christina is up.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to share my screen with you all just to overview our public safety grant terms and conditions. Is everybody able to see my screen?
Mm-hmm.
So this is a pilot program that is being undertaken by the MSD and Wilmington Downtown Incorporated as the administrator of this grant program. The city has, if you recall, allocated $25,000 in grant funding toward this particular project. This is just an overview of the program and why we have it, and including various measures to improve public safety downtown. We have been, and I can let Lawrence, who is MSD Advisory Committee representative for WDI and also our Grants Committee Chair, talk about our partners in this, who are avid security system gurus that can been working with him extensively on tailoring his security system to the WDPD Sting Center. And if you guys recall, this program is intended to provide exterior security cameras and footage that is able to be tied into the WPD Sting Center to help with active crimes. In addition, we're also including some lighting and other components that can help bolster the aesthetics and the safety of downtown. So have a quick overview here, attaching the MOU to this document. And so eligibility requirements, obviously applicants have to own or lease a property within the municipal services district. And the property has to be within the boundaries of the MSD. We're providing a link for folks to verify and check with if their property or parcel is within the MSD. There are a few that are on the outskirts and various streets along North 4th Street that get a little confusing. And then we have business or property owners can be eligible to apply. And the project must improve public safety and enhance the aesthetics of the downtown area, as I previously said. So we're looking at overall eligible projects, including security cameras, upgrading security systems to tie in with the WPD Sting Center, integrating systems, so labor costs or expenses to integrate the current security systems that they have and camera systems with the WPD Sting Center. We're including exterior lighting, building lighting, ambiance lighting, anything to improve visibility and safety in our streets and alleyways. And we're also including no trespassing signage as another coordinated effort with WPD to help with any trespassing concerns on private property, and other safety enhancements as approved by the WDI Grants Committee. Our ineligible projects include things like strobe lighting, neon lighting, interior cameras, non-permanent installations. So that's being any security measures that are mobile, like mobile lighting or portable cameras, security guards, routine maintenance, signage, as signage is included under our current facade improvement grant program, and festive lighting. So no Christmas lights for the front facade, and any other project is deemed unfitting for this program at the discretion of WDI. So this will be a matching grant program, just like our facade improvement grant program, all broken up into $2,500 per project grants, 50% match up to the total cost of the grant project, with a reimbursement of $2,500 maximum for each project. It's on a first come, first served basis. And priority is going to be given to those who are integrating their systems with WPD Sting Center. So pretty straightforward submission and application process. Each application will be reviewed by our WDI Grants Committee, and upon approval, each applicant has 6 months to complete the project. And then again, this just highlights our reimbursement grant process, and WDI will be integrating a hold harmless agreement, an indemnity agreement with this current program, and encourage and ask that all grant applicants who receive this funding sign it. So the two companies we have been speaking with in regards to this program are offering tailored services and also some discounted services, discounted rates for this particular program. And I'll turn it over to Lawrence to kind of give you the gist of what these security teams provide and his experience with them. in his own building.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for having me. Again, excited to chair this committee and help give out some grants to lead towards a better real-time response through the Sting Center. So yeah, I've used Optimum Fire and Security regularly in my business, and we had cameras installed about 6 months ago over on a 3rd Street building, and they have been excellent to work directly with the Sting Center. Calvin Barnes was actually going to come talk to us today, but unfortunately he's taken a sick day. So he's out. He may try and join the next meeting if we have some specific questions for him. But basically, these guys have taken several tours of the Sting Center. They've brought their IT teams. They brought their camera manufacturers who have to figure out exactly what specs each camera needs in order to be able to hook up to the Sting Center. And so they've just got a really good grasp on how the whole process works. And these guys are very committed to this program and to getting people hooked onto the center. So I know, especially for their services of hooking up existing cameras to the Sting Center, they've talked about doing those services for half price or even free. So they've been very good partners as far as getting us information and what we need in order to provide a streamlined service to the end user who's going to be taking advantage of the grant. So they can have a very easy process of applying and getting hooked up to the Sting Center once their cameras are up. So yeah, I think we're just very excited to get moving, and we think these guys are going to help push us over the line on a lot of these projects.
Thank you,
Lauren,
Lauren.
what is the, do you have an idea per camera, what the monthly fee is? Have they given you, or I'm sure you've seen it with your business?
Well, depending on how you set it up, you buy the cameras, you buy the box that goes, hooks up to your internet. My cameras are not monitored by a professional company. It is a no fee on a monthly basis. So I got 3 exterior cameras and the box hooked up. Altogether spent, gosh, I think it was about $3,500. And very high quality cameras. I can look at them on my phone, each one of them. And again, sort of the Sting Center in real time is able to access those cameras if something comes up on that block. So yeah, we're expecting something in the range, most businesses could only fit so many cameras on the outside. And so we're thinking a lot of companies probably already have the receiver box. So, a good quality camera installed runs probably a little less than $1,000 each. Somewhere between 600 and 1,000, depending on the quality you get. So I'm actually expecting a lot of these grants to not max out at 2,500. I'm thinking a lot of people are going to be adding 1 or 2 cameras and then hooking up to Sting. Some people might just be hooking up to Sting, in which case they might get a couple $100 grant. So I do expect this, instead of going to 10 recipients of 2,500 each, I'm expecting we're going to be able to expand this out and push to, even a dozen or a couple dozen separate applicants that can take advantage of the program.
Now, we've had homes security on the firehouse. We have 3 cameras and we have Ring.
And are you hooked up to Sting currently?
We were in the beginning. And believe me, we get a lot of calls every time there's an accident out there at 5th and Castle, right in that area, 5th and the police love to call and say, can we see your records? So we've come in handy. The Sting Center doesn't care about that. They're really only notified if there's a gunshot. But
yeah, well, certainly the Sting Center, they do look back if there's an incident, instead of them having to take the time to call you if there's somewhat of an emergency, having real-time access to those cameras instead of them. I mean, again, even if a landlord doesn't want to provide it, they have to go get a warrant, and it ends up taking a long time to get that footage, where I think the more of these exterior cameras we can have hooked up really helps the especially real-time response, but also after the fact. And that's real-time response for not just the police, but also fire and EMS, who are getting notes about what's going on at locations that they're on the way to. So yeah, we'd love to get you hooked back up to it. And there might be some grant money in it for you.
Nice. Now, we had one recently, I don't know if I told you guys this, it was funny, in the courtyard behind the firehouse. My sister had bought a new fire pit. So not even out of the box. Somebody about midnight rode by on their bike. You saw the guy pull up, get off the bike, go pick up the box, put it under his arm and ride off with a fire pit. So, and when we had the police look at it, they knew who it was. They said, you do not want to go after this guy. We let him keep the fire pit. We'll deal with him.
Thank you, Lawrence.
Anybody else have any questions about the program in general?
I was just gonna take everyone through the WPD MOU. I don't know if you all have seen the MOU, but this is for the, for tying in with the Sting Center. There's several things outlined in here, but, you know, this is an at-will, MOU between WPD and whomever's, entering into this agreement. However, going back to our program at the very top, we have asked in order to participate in the program that folks will remain tied to the Sting Center for the life of the security system and maintain a proper maintenance schedule and upgrades if they receive a full grant for this particular grant program. So
And if I could add to, one of the biggest issues we've had in the past when this has come up for discussion is people are worried about their interior cameras getting monitored by the police, and want to be very clear that when cameras come into the receiver box, they pick and choose which ones are wired to the Sting Center. So we are not at all wiring any interior cameras of any businesses to the Sting Center. This is specifically exterior facing. So we're not looking into a restaurant's kitchen and worried about what the staff is talking about or doing. This is strictly exterior. And companies who have both interior and exterior cameras, they only hook up the exterior camera and they do not touch any of the interior cameras.
And so once the implementation of this program is fully vetted and ready to go, I plan to have a meeting with our downtown Lieutenant Nichols, and go over some of the blind spots and areas to target first that would better help serve the police department, especially in terms of violent crime issues that they are facing in downtown Wilmington, mainly on Front Street.
I think that's all we got. I'm excited to get going on it.
Great. Thanks, guys. Any additional questions? Hearing none, we'll move on. Thank you both. On to reports. Speaking of Lieutenant Nichols, is he on the call?
Mr. Chair, he is not, but I do have a written update from him last night. He, think there's been some scheduling, shifting, with night shift, day shift. There was a sergeant that just passed away in the police force, so they've been shifting some folks around so that folks could get to that funeral. So downtown month of September, 150 total charges. ABC violations, there were 5. Most of them were related to overcrowding and blocking exit doors, or just getting accurate occupancy checks by those establishments, those Dirty Dan's, Ibiza, Bourbon Street, and I believe Varnish. And then there was also an ABC violation for Bourbon Street, where there was a possession of a weapon in the establishment. There's a Hells Angels motorcycle prospect who was inside the establishment, openly. I'm having a hard time pronouncing. Basically, he's carrying a firearm out in the open. The offender was charged with openly carrying a firearm in the establishment. Was written a warning for allowing this to happen. Drug related, there were 25 violations, 11 felony, 14 misdemeanor, 7 DWIs, and 113 other, which is comprised of trespassing, domestic related, resisting arrest, and et cetera, coming from Lieutenant. Positive note, the mounted officers are back on day shift, and they'll be working 7 days a week. And this day shift will continue through and until Azalea Festival next spring. And really, other than the one Bourbon Street firearm noted above, that was really the only major incident noted coming from Lieutenant.
Thank you, Chance. If no questions for Chance, move on to WDI's report.
I have one quick question.
Oh, sorry.
Last meeting, this is Ann. There was discussion regarding that when they report the police reports, that it doesn't say downtown Wilmington, and it may have happened up on Princess 17, 19, 20th Street. Was anything addressed on that where the crime reports reflect what's downtown proper?
I don't have anything coming through, filtering through me. And I think Ray was the one that brought this up, if I'm not mistaken. And I think, if I recall, most of it was coming out of the news organizations and not from internal communication or our emergency services. But I can certainly ask Lieutenant to see if there's been any discussion internally on how that's being handled.
Thank you.
All right. Anything else? And Christina, you're up.
Sure. So just to overview, the September, we had several special projects. We have reconfigured our walking paths with the MS Street D truck serving as anchor point, and these are going to be ongoing walking paths through the remainder of the period. Better to disperse our ambassadors throughout the central business district, pulling apart teams and having ambassadors, single ambassadors and walking paths on North 4th Street in the north end of the district, on the Riverwalk and in the district core. So we are working on this and evaluating it and restructuring it as we see fit. If we need to cover one area more than another, we will continue to do so. So we are reevaluating those walking paths on a consistent basis. We did a extreme weed abatement in Quince, Vance, and Wilkinson alleys. And we also targeted a special project on Campbell Street. The WMPO construction is wrapping up on their new facility off of Campbell and 4th Street. And as the construction materials and teams have vacated the property across the street, the MSD team went behind them and took care of the weeds that have been growing over the bricks and the construction materials for the past year and a half. So looks much better out there. The street is now open for parking. There's a lot of businesses that are happy about that. And we just made the sidewalks a little bit neater looking for folks who park on Campbell Street to get to any of the neighboring businesses in the Brooklyn Arts District. Currently, we are down 2 full-time ambassadors. We had one that quit and one that had been terminated. So we are actively searching for 2 full-time ambassadors. James has received over 50 applications and has conducted 20 interviews thus far. We did recently hire a part-time ambassador. It was a recommendation from Ambassador Rob, and he's brilliant. I'm excited for him to start and go through a 60-day period. But at the moment, we are down 2 full-time cleaning ambassadors while we have shifted our focus more on cleaning efforts. So we're asking part-time ambassadors to take on more of those roles, focusing less on hospitality engagements and just in keeping the district clean, focusing in the core districts, mainly along Front Street area, on Market Street and the Riverwalk, and making sure that we conduct our street light outage assessments and still try and do our special projects and meet demands where we need to. So with that, I'll take any questions.
It's good to hear we had all those applicants compared to where we were a few years ago and couldn't find enough people to work. I mean, it's bad that we're down, but at least we're getting applications. All right. If there are no questions for Christina, we can move on to Chance.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just 2 items to report out on updates. I did report to City Council's appointments committee back in September on its potential revisions to the MSD appointed committee. Brought some really one consolidated option to them of reducing it from a 14-member committee down to a 9-member committee. They were very receptive of this. I believe they were all in agreement to push this through at a future council meeting. And basically where we landed with this was really just consolidating and making their appointments easier, and then kind of widening the range of coverage and representation. So basically, instead of you know, a $2 million plus property owner, we slimmed that down to just 2 single property owners or real estate developers on the representation. We took it from 3 residents to 2 residents, and kind of consolidated single representation from, say, you know, hospitality, 1 from real estate, 1 from restaurant, 1 from retail. Consolidated that down to 3 representations that could cover pretty much all 4 of retail, restaurant, nightlife, hospitality, or professional services. And then WDI board member would remain, and then the DBA board representation would also remain. And then those that are representing now that the position wouldn't be there with the 9-member committee, we would naturally let the 14-member committee run until July of 2025, when those individuals are already set to expire with their current terms. So it seems like a pretty good process. Council was very receptive. I believe they will be bringing this to a future city council meeting as a resolution and to really codify this. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions on that one. I think I brought it up at the meeting back in August and didn't really get a lot of response or questions, but happy to answer any questions on that as well.
Is there anything we need to do, Chance, at this point?
I don't think so. I thought that the committee would need to take action on it, but council didn't seem to think that. I think it's really council driving the bus on this. And just for everyone's purposes, those folks, those committee members that would be expiring next year and would potentially roll off would be Ann, Nancy, and Nancy already expired back in 2023. So I think she's continuing her service. Beyond that, Ray, I think you extended your service. You would be expiring next year. Elizabeth, you as well. I think you and Ray both continued your service from the last 2+ years. And then James and McGee as well. Those would be the 5 that would naturally drop off as of July of 2025.
Okay.
And then what I would say and also recommend for those that do drop off, you want to continue on. I mean, as you know, we do have representatives drop off mid-year occasionally. So as that happens, you know, if you want to express interest in continuing on, there's a position open. I think council obviously would like to hear that and see that. And if not, then you can also always fill out an application later on to continue on this board or continue on the many council appointed public boards throughout the town. And then the only other item I had on my list, I just want to put a bug in everyone's ear. It's now October. We are coming up on everyone's favorite budget season, which brings in lots of thorough and, I wouldn't say heated, but very thorough and detailed discussion within the committee. Obviously, that's one of the most important, you know, roles you guys serve with this board and committee, is really directing both staff, city manager, and council on how we want to spend this money each year. So budget season is coming up. I think we'll come into it with the same process as the last couple of years, where we'll have WDI kind of create a base level budget and then throw a couple options out there, and we'll see where the funding lies. And then also just be thinking about some of those fund balance uses, similarly to how we did this year with the additional landscaping, barrier fencing on Front Street, as well as the public safety grant that we use the fund balance for, that Christina and Lawrence reported out on earlier. Those are two great fund uses this year. So just be thinking about budget in general. Holiday shopping and the MSD budget. That's what I want everyone to think about. From the city's perspective, I think that's it on my updates.
Okay, great. Thank you, Chance. Any questions for Chance?
One question, guys. Christina, I don't know if you're aware of it. There was a request to put a survey out to fund Wave Transit through the Christmas holiday. DBA had put it out, and it was suggested from, I think, came from the city to see if we would use some MSD funds to the tune of like 75,000. Is Chance, do you know? I mean, the results of the survey came in 50-50 in support and 50% against.
Yeah, Terry, I had spoke with both Christina, Tom, and Cheryl Hartso, who I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, is the president of the DBA currently. And basically with Wave having the potential shortfall to continue the trolley year round, there was a suggestion from the city manager to really talk to both downtown organizations to see if there would be support to potentially fund the additional 2 months this year, which would have been it's at its current route for November and December of this calendar year at the tune of $72,000 and some change. Cheryl never got back to me. She was supposed to get back to me last Friday, I think. She never got back to me. Per my understanding, at its current service level, at its current route, WDI was not in favor of utilizing MSD funds for this. I think they were 100% in favor for Wave to figure this out and fund it for 2 additional months this year, at its own funding source, but not the use of the MSD funds. Another complicating matter of it was, at its current route, a good chunk of that downtown trolley route is south of the MSD geographic perimeter. I think as soon as you go south on Front Street and pass Ann Street, you essentially leave the MSD geographic perimeter there, and going all the way down to Castle and eventually down to Satellite and the Greenfield South Front area. That's a hefty portion that's outside of the MSD that the MSD could not legally fund. So I think at this point, unless the committee would like to take a motion on it, I don't think without WDI support and a unanimous DBA support, I don't think the funding through the MSD would be an option at this point.
Well, I think the other thing is we still haven't, even if support was there, we still need to figure out the piece that we are not allowed to fund. How does that get taken care of? And I think there's still a big open question mark. If that was answered, I think, we might be able to come back and WDI, we might have to take another look at it, but that's a big open loop there to.
Yeah, I agree, Tom. And also Wave just presented to council on Tuesday night this week, kind of what their board came to with the recommendations and support of the revised route schedules overall throughout the city and county, as well as the revised Wave trolley route, which would end October 31st and then pick back up, I think either March 1st or April 1st. And I believe those 2 council members that are on both the WDI board and the DBA board, didn't mention a thing during that presentation in terms of, wanting to pursue MSD funds there.
Honestly, when I guess it was 6-7 years ago when we worked so hard to get the trolley replaced and bring in the 2 new ones and expand beyond just the Front Street shuttle. the goal all along was to run on a 20-minute cycle. So this thing was basically sabotaged from the beginning. It won't work on a 40-minute cycle. It can't. And Raleigh is 12 minutes and it works. So, and the other outcry is there's not a single, there's not any stakeholder in this community on their board anymore. It's all the commissioners, city council. So, yeah, we've just about given up.
Yeah. WDI has brought, at least to me and to its own board, and stakeholder groups, some pretty exciting additional, potentially supplemental options to the wave trolley, with a kind of a point-to-point service, golf cart / vehicle app-based service. I think that's something that the MSD could potentially review and potentially fund in the future. And I think it'd probably be advantageous for us to maybe bring some representatives from a couple of those companies to one of our future meetings and kind of talk through what they do, where they do it, how they do it, and what other communities they might serve, to see if, maybe there is an above and beyond and supplemental piece that could really help not only the core of downtown, but also potentially connecting to some of the new growing areas as well, like the Soda Pop, as well as the cargo district, something like that.
And Castle Street as well. And
Castle
some of the
Street
numbers,
as well,
and some of the numbers we
exactly.
were seeing too were roughly half of what we're talking about for Wave.
Yeah.
So
I will tell you, and this, I feel like I'm on DPAC now, but the new restaurant that opened up at Pier 33, the employees are getting booted to the tune of $460 last night. There's not enough parking for, there's not much open there retail. They're the only ones basically full-fledged. We're going to have some more and more problems with employees trying to get close enough to their workplace. So I know we had done rooftop discounts on the decks. Is that in place for the city deck or the new city hall deck?
Terry, great question. Currently we do not have kind of a rooftop or a discounted rate. It's certainly something we are looking at for next year through this current budget cycle. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, both of the new non-city owned but publicly offered parking decks on the north end, on site at Pier 33 and on site at the Metropolitan, both of those facilities and communities have roughly 80 to 90 public spaces, and they do boot their public parkers if they run overtime. So I'm hoping the note you got was from them and not from us. But yeah, we're looking at it. It's already in my Rolodex to start talking through it once we really get hard and heavy with the parking side of the budget this year, to potentially look at some different options at the Skyline deck, because there's, on any given day, especially at night, there's 900 plus empty spaces in that deck. So anything we can do to fill those empty stalls is going to help.
Well, I've got to call her as soon as we hang up because they are losing it. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, they're very, very, very upset. And I've left Todd a couple of messages today, so hopefully.
Yeah, we've internally been getting a lot of calls at the city about those booting practices at Pier 33 and the Metropolitan. And just so everyone on the call knows, similarly to how we manage our parking both on street and in the parking lots. If say you pay for an hour and you run over that hour, city issues a $20 parking citation. 3 or more then can activate a boot process. But at Pier 33 and the Metropolitan currently, and they're allowed to do this within state general statute guidelines, which really constrains what the city can and can't do to regulate it. If you run over your paid parking at either one of these two new communities, they legally have the ability to put a boot on your car and charge whatever fee they want to charge. So
Unlimited.
It's unlimited. Yeah, the city doesn't, based on state statute, the city is not allowed to put a limit on what they can charge from a private boot or towing company. So that's unfortunate.
I'm sure our council members are getting calls right now, so it may be expedited. I'm hoping they can park in the grass field that DeWitt owns. I mean,
Yeah, they have the field across the street there. We do have just general monthly parking at Skyline, Terry, which is $100 a month.
Yeah.
Comparable to what our normal market rate is down the street.
these are all observers though.
Yep, understood.
So,
That should be a conversation looked into at some point, that Skyline Parking Center.
What was that, Nick? Sorry, I think I missed that.
I don't know if this is really a advisory committee thing or just something that maybe should be brought up at a city council meeting, but the parking fee structure at the Skyline Center should be reevaluated, especially when so much of the building is currently empty. There's no reason why the parking should be the same as it is at River Place, our most consolidated parking deck, or at Market in Front, which is the heartbeat of downtown.
Yep, understood.
All right. Any questions for Chance? Hearing none, I think we're done. I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second? See a second, all in favor?
Second.
Aye.
Hang up. See ya. Everybody have a great weekend.
Everybody have a great weekend. Thank you.